And in 2000, I had my 19th company go public. I retired for a bit. I started kiteboarding and then became a sponsored athlete, and then much later started a little nonprofit that supports environmental concerns.
And what was your aha moment?
My aha moment, as I was kiteboarding around the world, I would go to the same places roughly once a year. And it's one of those things where if you have a brother or sister and you see them every day, you don't notice any change. If you have a cousin that you see once a year, there is a lot of change every time you see them. And I would go to the same places and just see rapid deterioration. And I'd get our kiteboarding crew to try to pick stuff up, but it just became insurmountable year after year. It just got worse and worse. And not that I can do a lot, but I thought we had to do something about it. And that was part of what turned our community into the nonprofit that it is.
Hi, I'm Andrew Forrest. My aha moment was 4 years. I put my life on hold and did a PhD in marine ecology. Really looking forward to learning everything about marine life, and I'm afraid what I came up hard against was marine death. And the further I looked into it, I've been published on this now, I see that the world has got a dramatic education coming as well, that it's not just fish which are copying it. Or when we have the great migrations of fish being interrupted because plastic can penetrate the blood-brain barrier of fish and of mammals, and therefore of humans, we have so much bad news, and I'll be happy to speak with you about it.
Thank you. I'm Lisa Andrews. I'm expert faculty for Singularity University. I'm the country partner for Singularity U Australia. I run global impact challenges looking for people with ideas and scale-ups who want to change the world, and an angel investor in VC through IA Impact. And my aha moment was actually at a presentation similar to this, and one of the gentlemen shared, Tom Chi, he said that 100 million marine animals die from ocean plastic every year, but then he posed the question to us in the audience, and he said, but how many do you think already have their bellies half full? And that to me just hit home.
Pleasure to be amongst you all. Thanks, Karen, for hosting. I'm Niall Dunne, the CEO of Polymateria. We're, despite the Irish accent, a British business that has created a new technology called biotransformation to fully biodegrade the most highly littered forms of plastic without impacting recycling. My aha moment was when I watched in October 2017 a video very similar to this, but it was Sir David Attenborough. I have worked my whole career in sustainability, but the hard-nosed commercial side of sustainability had taken a portfolio of British Telecom of about 1.2 billion, grown that to 3.2 billion over about a 6 to 7 year period. Watching that program, though, I was struck by the fact that there was no silver bullet when it came to plastic pollution. There was no Tesla, there was no BMW i range, there was nothing that we could really point to and say that is both credible and scalable. Around the time I realised that, some of the founders of Polymateria approached me about coming in to help not just disrupt with the technology, but disrupt the entire system. So happy to share all of that with you.
Okay, so we'll start off with our first question, and it's open to the panelists, so jump in. So there's about 50 to 70 companies that produce 90% of the plastics, and so how do we engage these companies? How do we get them involved so that we can really push the needle on the subject?
Look, I engage them as a business person, and the only really useful thing environmentally about having made capital is that they take a call, and then you can get in and see them. And what I proposed to many of those 70 to 90 odd companies, take the majority safely, is that first of all, I explained that the information will hit the public that nanoplastics, which no one talks about, is one of the most lethal poisons on earth. That it's not a cyanide or a strychnine, which will hurt you really badly or kill you, but only once. Not nanoplastics, it'll circulate through the system for hundreds of years, and under a microscope it's a toxic little shard of glass. It carries a positive charge, attracts anything with a negative charge, which is mercury, zinc, things which don't go well in the human brain. And when I've got their attention, they say, well, how can we fix this? And I've said, well, there is a solution. We need to raise the value of fossil fuel plastic to above the price. It's only 25 to 30%. Now technology's come right up. 25 to 30% difference. We need to raise the price of fossil fuel plastic to above the price of recycled plastic. At that moment, the market takes over. The world goes to recycle plastic. Every bit of plastic on the streets in Indonesia becomes a commodity. People who live with the most terrible waste have now the biggest financial resource. And they're not all getting there, but I reckon they will in the end.
Yeah, I'll chime in on, I think Andrew and I have gotten to know each other for over a few years, and the thinking that he's put behind his initiative is remarkable because it basically captures economic forces to let the flywheel start and go by itself. Andrew, many know that he was the CEO of Forrest and Metals and created the Mindaroo Foundation with, was it $1.5 billion donation? I can't remember.
Yeah, to 2 now.
Two. Okay, so he's raising it. And around this initiative, he put in another 400 million Australian to prime the pump, to create the capital pool to shift those economics that he talked about. Because if you think about all the things that you can, not just the nano and microplastics, but the bottles that you see, they just keep coming. And if you tried to get the whole world to pull all that stuff up, I don't know how many billions of dollars and how many decades, it can't be done. So the only viable solution is at the source. And so by shifting the economics, and you were the one that taught me, and on that video, 85% of aluminum gets recycled. Why? It's cheaper for an aluminum producer to use something that's partially, kind of manufactured than digging it up. So if that little shift can happen, where raw new plastic is slightly more expensive than the recycled, all the old stuff's gonna get picked up. And that's the beauty of what he's doing.
Lisa, you wanted to add something else?
That's incredible. I'm from Australia as well, and as one of the most successful business people in Australia, and if not the most successful, and leading the way in a lot of the initiatives that you're doing, you shared with us in December and some of the macroeconomic stats. And for me, that was such a huge eye-opener. And I remember stats, speaking my first language being maths. And you shared that there's only 600 or 700 companies in the world that make plastic, and less than 100. Yeah, that are actually notable and worth talking about. And I'll get you to share some more on that. I think from a macroeconomic point of view, we're in a time now where we're moving in the next 10 years to this future of perfect knowledge. And so we've currently got 40 billion devices and 1 trillion sensors on the planet. And then in the next 10 years, we're going to have 500 billion devices and 100 trillion sensors. And so this future of perfect knowledge, what do we need to know? And then how can we actually educate people to then go and take action? So thank you for leading the way in that. And I think this is the time to be able to make a big difference.
I think you're yeah.
Thanks, Lisa. Speaking from the perspective of a business that spent 5 years in R&D trying to figure out the answers to the questions, scientifically the answers to the questions that Andrew and Bill have eloquently articulated, paradoxically, the most highly littered forms of plastic, polyolefins, so PP and PE, in Bill McDonough's view, in other kind of experts' views, are good candidates for return to nature. The problem is when you broaden out into polystyrene, into BPA, into PVC, and you get into things that have plastics that have a lot of toxics built in to the resins, either in the resins themselves or in the additives, you create eco-toxicology issues like Andrew was talking about. So just to throw out some data to the room, of the 360 million tonnes we produced in 2016, 40% went to landfill, 32% into the natural environment, 14% recycled, but most of that was downcycled, so not really circular, and then 14% was incinerated. The kind of the obsession from our business's perspective is how do we create a technology that solves for fugitive, polyolefins being the biggest quotient of the 32% that's leaking, without creating microplastic and without creating any ecotoxicology issues. What we found is a universal response from the biggest brands in the world, which is, this is too good to be true. When they come to our labs, when they visit, when they see our data, when they see our evidence, they go, oh, shit, let's do a trial. You then spend about 9 months with the R&D guys doing whatever tests they want to do before you have a commercial discussion, before you talk to marketing. You're 24 months at that stage into dealing together with a global emergency. So the pace of these big businesses is incredibly slow, and it's not their fault. They're organized internally with silos to kind of de-risk and not take a chance on anything new that's emerging. So what we've had to do as a disruptive technology and explain this to our investors as a key part of our go-to-market is open source parts of our IP. So share the evidence and the data and the goalposts that we work to, work with the British Standards Institute, work with ASTM, work with CEN and say, oh, everything Andrew and Bill have said, there's scientific ways of proving you don't do that. Here's our evidence, here's our data. Let's create new standards, new goalposts so innovation can emerge. That's point to leverage one. The second is the consumer. We've seen with Greta, we've seen with Extinction Rebellion that the bottom-up pressure on the system is growing and growing. It's not enough just to demonize plastic and say, we need to ban it. The consumer wants practical solutions. They want to fix the core product. Bill is right. They want to see something that is both recyclable and biodegradable, and they want to be inspired and to take action. So we found ourselves having to launch initiatives like the Recycle By campaign, which mobilizes and empowers the consumer, as well as creating confidence for the market in the standards landscape, and that all has a cost. And we need investors who believe in that and will support that and give us the runway to execute.
Can I just add to that, but perhaps put my view on it as a business person? We will take in big business a long time if everything's normal. If things become a bit abnormal, like there's a market shift, businesses can move overnight. Like, bang, that decision happens. If this is an existential risk or if we're going to lose market share, you would, I'm sure, not be amazed, but they would just move like lightning. So I feel that the science, which is building, and you've seen a lot of it, hasn't connected the dots yet in this fabulous video that we're consuming a lot of plastic. I'm not that concerned about microplastic. You know, I don't like it. I don't like the fact that my kids consume it, that we all consume it in this room. But what I'm extremely concerned about is nanoplastic. Nanoplastic is destroying sea life everywhere. It is the ultimate destination for every piece of plastic on this planet, and then it lasts and it lasts and it lasts. And while it can go through our skin like that, you know, it can get into the bloodstream, and it being a person who's put $150 million into brain cancer research, it's one of these impenetrable problems. It's a minor cancer which kills more kids than you dream of. But the big problem with it is that you can't get the medicine through that membrane, that blood-brain barrier membrane. Well, guess what goes through it like that? Nanoplastic. Now, I think once this starts to get out, once the market starts to hear, then you won't get, oh, situation normal, just see if we can be a bit more competitive than the next guy. You'll say, oh my God, existential risk will move by breakfast.
So I think you guys have touched on it a little bit, the importance of education, right?
Yeah.
And I know there's data and statistics out there. And how do you communicate that? So we know that there's 7.7 billion people in the world, and most of them, like 5 billion, are coming from emerging economies. So how do we educate people to really make a difference and shift the needle on this topic? Lisa?
Yeah.
Sounds like that's a really hard one.
I think information is power,
Yeah.
and particularly if you look at the average age in some of those emerging economies, how do we get into some of these schools and then lead by example and share with them some of this information? And we've got great leadership coming from the younger generation, like Greta Thunberg, and I know UNICEF are working with a lot of the schools. Unlearning is quite difficult. So for us to go and not buy plastic bottles is a lot different from the younger generation if they just know it's bad. And I'll give you an example. My 7-year-old niece, she watched the documentary where a turtle had a straw stuck in its nose and it was bleeding, and she's very caring, empathetic young girl. And she went out into the playground and saw the bins overflowing, and there was a straw there, and she thought, is my school responsible for that turtle? And I went, wow, and she got so inspired. She went home and she drew all these pictures, and one of them was this tree hug a tree with me, and like a no plastics, and the big red circle with the line through it, and the actions of things that she can do, like eat nude food, so food without packaging. And I was so inspired by her, I actually brought her into the office for 4 Tuesdays in a row, and I told my team that she was inspired, got her to do some research, and taught her how to Google and find out some of the statistics. And we published it in a book for her. So we took her pictures and Maya's facts, and then I gave her a box of 500 books for Christmas. I wrapped it with some instructions on how to do a book launch. So we lined the entire family up for Christmas, and we got them to pay $10 for a book, and then she then went and decided, shared with her that she needed to put a percentage into giving back. And she came up, this was about a month later, she said, I want my dad to take me to the hardware store because, I've got a new invention. When I'm riding my bike to school and I see plastic, I want to be able to pick it up. So I'm going to design a basket that goes on the front of my bike where I can have some gloves and somewhere I can put the trash so that we can pick up trash safely. And she's 7.
She's a little kid.
So how do we inspire those 5 billion and those younger kids? Because they don't need to unlearn our bad habits.
Right.
Neil, you have something to add yet?
Yeah, I think just the magic of kids and how they get it so quickly, and their creative minds, I think is incredibly powerful. To build on what Lisa said, with the World Economic Forum, we did some work through the Engaging Tomorrow's Consumers Initiative over about 6 or 7 years, where the biggest brands in the world, Walmart, Nike, AB InBev, Coca-Cola, all came together and said, we've been collaborating a lot in our supply chain and trying to deal with these nexus issues. Collaboration in the face of the consumer, frankly, isn't happening. How do we shift the nature of consumption from conspicuous to much more conscientious, much more collaborative mechanisms? It took about 7 to 8 years and a lot of neuroscience work to kind of figure out what we needed to do to engage the biggest population of plastic on planet Earth, which are millennials, 1.8 billion of them. The brands were obsessed between this gap between thought and action. Millennials seem to be very engaged on sustainability, yet when you wanted them to take action, just look at Glastonbury last summer, they won't. So what is the problem? And what the research concluded was that they don't want to be lectured to. They do not want another green leaf stuck on something, but they really do want to be empowered. And if they feel that their action is really going to count to something, they will be your most powerful champions. So it was on the back of that insight, if you think about, we're a B2B brand. We sit behind the biggest packaging companies in the world, we sit behind the biggest brands. What business do we have talking to consumers? Yet we had to in order to speed the whole system up. So we took all of that research and created the concept of recyclable, where we can time control exactly when the technology is triggered. Whilst the consumer may not understand compostability or biodegradability, they understand perishability. They know if the food's going off on Wednesday, you got to clean the fridge out on a Thursday. We introduce perishability to packaging, and we can control exactly when the date is. So you can empower them to take action by June 2021, recycle this by that date. If you do your bit, the brand does their bit, but it winds up in nature, it will fully biodegrade. Here's a QR code, here's the science and the data against this new standard that backs it off up in the cloud. And it's these types of initiatives, we can't do it on our own. We need government, we need brands, we need people who really understand education much more than we do to help really disrupt the entire system.
Yeah, can I ask, so that's compostable? Does it break down to nitrogen, hydrogen, oxygen? Or?
Yes, it does, yeah, in the natural environment, yeah.
Okay, and does it need sunlight or anything?
All the natural agents of decay, so UV light, air, moisture, microbes, just like anything else that will biodegrade fully.
And landfill in Australia?
It doesn't, it mummifies in landfill. Nothing happens. Nothing mummifies in landfill. We're digging up landfill from the 70s and 80s and we're reading the newspapers.
No, but so
I think they can hear.
okay. No, thank you.
Yeah.
And just as I'm technically a millennial, so just to represent on that, technically, so I think we run events and our theme last year was a future by design. And It's like, how do we design the future without the millennials and the future in the room? And for me, and with big corporates, I think we're naturally already doing it in that when we hear about companies doing great things, and I'm not sure if anyone's heard about Adidas, and they made 11 million pairs of shoes from the ocean plastic last year, out of 400 million in total. And they've got their Futurecraft Loop shoes, which is creating a circular economy where if you buy a pair of shoes, then you can send it back and it breaks down. It's all one material, new science, and they'll 3D print it into a new pair of shoes, which is in commercial production for 2021 is going to come out. But I've always worn Nikes, and so I love fashion, and circular economy in fashion is important, but I will absolutely change to Adidas because they're doing that.
There you go.
I want to come back to the question of education, because all of this is very educational, but it's not emotionally educational. Right? And so I think this is one of the problems we face today, that society has turned into this sort of thing that really reacts to media in certain ways. And I think that the little films thing that we saw, there were moments where you felt something and it drove a need for action. And I was kicking around an idea that I don't know how relevant it is, but Andrew and I, he was able to get Harrison Ford, who I didn't know was on the board of Conservation International for 25 years, to help launch this initiative at the UN General Assembly in September. And I'm going to ask a question because I want to see a show of hands. Before I say that, so plastics are a relatively new phenomenon. It's actually hard to put it in perspective, but humans have been around for 400,000 years. In the 70s, places like Epcot Center were building displays of houses made of this modern material, and it would transform the world. That's 40 years out of 400,000, and look what it's done, right? And but how many of you have seen the movie The Graduate?
Yeah.
Okay, so now this is where to answer this. Okay, so you guys,
the Dustin Hoffman one.
Dustin Hoffman. So you guys will remember that scene, young college graduate, trying to figure out his future. He's sleeping with the wife of a guy, and the guy puts his arm around Dustin and says, "I need to have a word with you." And he's totally frozen. And they walk outside to the swimming pool.
Terrifying.
Yes, and he says, one word, plastics. Right, that was the future. He said, plastics are our future. Look what it's done in 40 years. And so I asked Andrew, I said, Andrew, I want us to recreate that scene. Let's get Dustin, if you're listening, let's get Dustin Hoffman to put his arm around some super famous young person that all these people relate to. Just a little quick scene where, similar situation, and the young guy walks out with Dustin and he says, 40 years ago I was standing at this pool and I was told the future was plastics. Look what we've done. And then shift to this No Plastic Waste.org initiative and just get people educated off of a high note.
That's a great idea.
Well, I would love the help.
Let's go do
it. I have a lot of ideas, I just need the help. So anyone that wants to write a script that can get us in touch with a video production company, let's get this thing going.
We have a film crew here.
I'll come in with Dustin.
I just love your creativity, Bill, and a lot of people are like, we gotta think outside of the box, and Bill just throws the box away. There is no box.
I've never been.
That's what we need. That's what we need, really. So I know, Andrew, I know you have to leave soon. So I'd like to just maybe hand the mic to you and just your parting words of advice for the audience, or anything else you'd like to say before you leave. And then we're gonna continue the panel and have a couple more questions and then open it up to the audience.
Thank you very much. Look, I don't mean to be cataclysmic or depressing. It's just that when you study something for 4 years and you start to learn about it in year one and then you chase it down the burrow, by the 4th year, you can become deeply concerned. And the scientists at the Ellen MacArthur Foundation say, and our science endorses it, that if we go the way we are, and I have to say that petrochemical companies are ramping up their production while carbon becomes more and more of an issue and we switch to renewables, they're losing sales. And guess how they think they're going to make up those sales, ladies and gentlemen? They're going to make it up out of making more plastic. And they're thinking of all sorts of ways to make more and more plastic. And I serve on the United Nations Expert Council for Marine Waste, and we're looking at around 1 billion tonnes of plastic. We're about 350 million tonnes now. So going up almost 2.5, 3 times. So that means that we'll have about 1/3 per weight of plastic in the oceans as we will fish in 2025. That's here and now. Now, you're probably all very familiar with the specific gravity of plastic compared to fish. I mean, that would comfortably wipe out marine life. So we don't have a lot of time here. You know, we have to move with really serious urgency. And further than that, you've heard me speak about the health impacts. Now, the World Health Organization came out, I think, a little unhelpfully last year. They did not refer to nanoplastic. They deliberately chose the words microplastics and said, we don't know if they're bad for you. We don't know if they're good, and we don't know if they're bad. We just don't know. And I said, well, why don't you just shut up? But anyway, so wind forward, and I asked one of the experts, if it's true that nanoplastics can penetrate the blood-brain barrier of ocean-going mammals, would it not also be true that they can penetrate the brains of humans? And there's a long pause, and then I said, in your scientific research, have you discovered nanoplastics in the cadavers which you have studied? And they said yes. I think this information is going to come out, and I think that all of us should spread that word. You certainly heard it here. And we've got to lift this out of the marine environment, because I've had really great executives say, well, you didn't have my attention because I don't care much about fish, but now you've really got my attention, because now we're talking about their consumers. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you so
Well
much.
done.
Yes. Yeah.